Hello everyone, I'm hoping you can see and hear me okay. I am just going to quickly introduce myself in this afternoon's webinar before handing you over to Julie from Pioneers Post for what I am sure will be an incredibly interesting discussion. So my name is Ishita and I am the project manager over at Good Finance. If you haven't heard of us already, Good Finance is an online platform and our mission is to help charities and social enterprises navigate the world of social investment. So everything that we can do, everything that we do is built and shaped by charities and social enterprises. And there are a couple of things on our website that if you're considering social investment or want to find out more about it, are definitely worth you checking out. So we've got an investor directory on there with over 100 social investors and funds listed. And at the moment, we also have a COVID-19 resource hub, which some of you might find helpful. So that is Good Finance, and you can find us on www.goodfinance.org.uk. So Good Finance, we've been partnered with Pioneers Post for coming up to 3 years now, and we are really looking forward to this webinar this afternoon that they will be hosting with us. It's safe to say that when we were planning the webinar last year, we had no idea what things were really going to be looking like in January 2021, and here we are. So from everything to clapping for carers, to looking after ourselves during a pandemic, to the vaccine rollout, health and social care has been a big topic in the last year, and I am super interested to hear from frontline charity social enterprises today about their experiences in health and social care. So without further ado, I am going to hand you over to Julie, who is the global editor of Pioneers Post and will be facilitating this afternoon's conversation.
Hi everyone, thank you Ishita for introducing me and introducing us all. Yeah, I'd also like to welcome you to today's webinar, which is called Planning for a Brighter Future, Lessons for 2021 from Social Entrepreneurs and Social Investors on the front line of health and social care during COVID-19. I'm Julie Pybus, I'm the global editor at Pioneers Post, and we're the independent news network for the global impact community. If you don't know us already, you can find us online at pioneerspost.com and on social media on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn and Instagram. So take a look. As is the way with these things, I'm just having a delivery of wood behind me from a big truck. So if there's sort of crashing sounds and barking going on, that's what's happening. So that's the way the webinars go, I'm afraid. We've all got sort of dogs and kids and all sorts of things going on in the background. So yeah. Like Ishita said, when we were planning this webinar in the later stages of last year, we were sort of imagining that by this time we'd be in a different, more positive place, not only basking in the UK's post-Brexit sunlit uplands, but also enjoying newfound freedoms from the COVID-19 virus thanks to the vaccine. But of course that hasn't really happened yet, and we're once again locked down. The kids are at home, we're struggling to keep everyone safe and healthy. We're worried about friends, family, colleagues in the face of this new wave of the pandemic. Nevertheless, hope does remain on the horizon, and we want this webinar to be a source of energy and inspiration and positivity for all of you who've joined us here today. So we've got a fantastic panel of social entrepreneurs to introduce you to, who've been working on the front line of physical and mental health and social care over the past year. They've survived the turbulence of the pandemic, switching the way they work, delivering differently, keeping their people safe, and they're here today to tell their stories and to share what they've learned, to give us all some lessons to take away with us into 2021. And we've got some social investors here today too. They're the funders of two of our speakers, and together we'll explore what they've done to support their investees during the pandemic and hear about some of their plans for the future too. So let me introduce our panel to you. we've got, in fact, you guys could start turning your cameras on, panel members, and then everyone can see you. There you are, Sarah. We've got Sara Hawkins, who's the founder of Projekt42 in Edinburgh. She was our SE100 Trailblazing Newcomer winner, and we announced that in the middle of last year, and I'm pleased to say that her resilience that won her the award and impressiveness means she's still here today after having gone through some ups and downs over the past few months. We've got Brian Bolt, who's Director of Finance at St Helena Hospice in Essex, currently swanning around on a beach in Norfolk, I think, there, with his lovely background. St Helena Hospice was an SE100 Social Investment Award finalist with Big Issue Invest for the investment they'll tell you about shortly. And this is a hospice that's thinking strategically about its income streams and doing really interesting things to develop them and develop its resilience as an organisation. We've also got Maria Mills, who's the CEO of Active Prospects, and we recognised her organisation in the SE100 Index last year too. This is an organisation that's grown strongly over the past few years, and they've also maintained that growth during the pandemic. So we'll be talking a little bit about growth and resilience again to Maria in a little while, and they've had some funding from SASC to help them move forward strongly. We've got Mark Bickford, that was bad pronunciation, who's the Chief Investment Officer at Social and Sustainable Capital. As I mentioned, they're an investor in Active Prospects, and you might have been reading about SASC over the past few months, particularly for the property related investments that they've been working on recently, which has aroused quite a lot of interest. And finally, we've got Jonny Page, who's investment manager at Big Issue Invest, one of the UK's leading social investors, and the investor in St Helena Hospice too. That's all our panelists. Welcome to you all. Also behind the scenes, we've got my colleague Simona from Pioneers Post. She's doing those messages on the chat that you can see there. And she's done a lot of the hard work for this event to make it happen. And our reporter Laura is watching too, and she'll be doing some tweeting and writing a story afterwards. So feel free to retweet and get online during this webinar too. And all of you watching here today are part of this webinar. It's a bit sort of like talking into the void sometimes with these webinars. So do introduce yourself to everyone on the chat. Tell us where you are and what you're doing. We'd love to find out more about you. We're going to have a discussion among the panel until about 3 o'clock. And after that, we'll invite questions from the audience. At any point, please put questions to us. Please use the Q&A function if it's a question you'd like us to put to the panel at the end. They're much easier for me to see instead of having to scroll through the chat at the end. So in the sort of bottom middle of your screen somewhere, there'll be a Q&A little speech bubble thing. So please put any questions there. And when it comes to the questions, we can unmute you and give you the opportunity to ask your question yourself if you'd like to. So let's get started. Everyone's settled and comfortable, I think. So let's talk to the panel. I'm going to invite each of our panel members to introduce themselves, to briefly describe what their organisation does, to mention what social investment they've had, and maybe just to, in this first round of conversation, highlight one thing that they've learned as leaders or as social investors during the pandemic. So let's kick off with Sarah. Would you like to answer some of those questions, please?
Yeah, so Projekt42 is a wellness centre. We use the sale of our fitness services, personal training and physiotherapy to fund free and low-cost counselling and mental health services for the community. So we have a circular revenue model where we we make money on one side of the business through the sale of fitness, and we use that money to support access to free and low cost counselling and mental health support. The second question is social investment. We've taken £50,000 from Big Issue Invest, and with that we bought a series of top-end spinning bikes, which enabled us to launch additional fitness classes. And within sort of 6 months, we were able to generate enough revenue to pay that investment back. And then I think that was it for today. Right now, wasn't it? Just the 2 questions, sorry. Have I missed one?
Yeah, Sarah, tell us one thing that you've learned as a leader over the past few months.
Gosh,
you can give us a bit of an insight into what you've been through, if you like.
So I would say 2020 for me was the year I learned to be a proper leader. I think previous to that, I was just really playing in it and pretending to coordinate and manage and run this team at Projekt42. I think COVID has taught me to make decisions quickly and to stick by them, and not to have a wavering opinion, to lead with sort of decisiveness, to go with my gut feeling a bit more. Projekt42 has gone through a whole cycle of ups and downs because of COVID. At the start of COVID, we had to close our facility. We were very unsure about what the future would hold. We then went through a process of making our facility COVID safe, changing the entire interior to be COVID safe and friendly, to deciding, doing a complete U-turn on that and closing the facility completely ahead of COVID restrictions, and then transitioning all of our services back online. So we've had like a stop-start. We've gone online, back to face-to-face, back to online, closing the facility completely, having to change the team to meet the demand of the current needs of the business. That we had a face-to-face team. We then had to change the team to be a team that's suitable for delivering online, and that meant redundancies and introducing new people. So it's been a lot of up and down, and sort of stopping and starting and not knowing whether we're making the right decision, and sort of going right back to zero, effectively becoming a new organisation within 12 months. Yeah, that's the COVID journey for Projekt42 has been very sporadic, very sort of, each week you speak to us, it would be a different story for at least 3-4 months, what we're planning to do, what we're delivering, and then 7 days later we've changed our mind and we're doing something completely different.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. It's really interesting. I think a lot of people are reflecting on leadership and what they've had to face as leaders over the past few months, and how it's helped develop them maybe as leaders. And I think it's important for us all to take this time to reflect on that and support each other, because being a social entrepreneur is often a very isolated role, isn't it? So it's nice to sort of share that within a group and think together what we've learned. So thank you, Sarah. Let's move to Brian at St Helena Hospice. Could you tell us a little bit, like Sarah did, what your organisation does, a little bit about your social investment that you've had recently, and one thing that you've learned as a leader during the past few months?
Thank you for the introduction, Julie. So I'm Brian Bolt. I'm Finance and Commercial Director at St Helena Hospice in the east of England. We're a hospice. I suspect many of you will either have encountered or know people who've encountered a hospice. We provide care support to people who have terminal conditions, looking after both them and their family, however they define their family. We've been very much, I think, at the forefront of what's happened. We're a healthcare organisation anyway. So we're used to looking after people who are unwell. We now find that we have patients transferred to us from NHS who have COVID, and we're having to find ways of dealing with those while looking after all the other people who continue through their last stages of life, alongside the new cohort of people who have this illness that's going around at the moment. So we've been in this position which I suspect many organisations have, of having lost a lot of income, but simultaneously we've had huge additional demands placed on us for more and more. So an interesting challenge being stretched in two different directions. The social investment we have is we worked with Big Issue, I think over a couple of years now. We put in place a loan facility of £1.5 million to support the growth of our lottery. Our lottery is a very significant part of our income, but unlike many other charities that run lotteries, we run lotteries for other charities as well. So we run them for 14 hospices and about 13 or so other non-hospice charities. So there are nearly 30 other charities who benefit from the work that we do from our lottery. We had just put in this funding, I think, and drew down the first tranche of it in September of 2019, and had 6 months of really seeing fantastic growth in our lottery, which all came to a grinding halt around about March, April last year, when we started to move into a lockdown. Since then, we've been treading water, trying to maintain it at a good level, ready to go again once we're given the green light, which we thought we were given in the summer. And so we geared up again for a couple of months, only to then gear down again shortly thereafter. So an interesting journey. I suppose what I've learned from the last 12 months or so is never rule out anything. If you'd have asked me a year or two ago, what would force you to close your shops on 24 hours notice, I'd say, well, I can't imagine anything that would do that. And lo and behold, Boxing Day last year, that's exactly what we had to do, given 24 hours notice to close all our shops, and with it £250,000 worth of income a month. So that short notice, suddenly finding you've got a huge gap in your finances, does concentrate the mind a little bit. The other big lesson is don't underestimate the resilience and resourcefulness of your staff. We have approximately 350 paid staff on our books and nearly 1,000 volunteers that contribute to our organisation. And I'm constantly surprised how they find ways of continuing to support both the organisation and the patients we work with. It's really a challenge, sometimes trying to hold them back rather than let them go. Volunteers who are in that age group, they're supposed to be clinically vulnerable. We're having to almost lock the door on them to keep them out because they want to come in and help and support. And that's, I think, the two big lessons. Always assume the worst can happen. Make sure you've got your income as diverse as you can get it to be. That will give you a little bit of resilience, and appreciate and support your staff.
Thank you, Brian. That enthusiasm of staff and volunteers is something I think a lot of people working in this arena can understand, and I think we'll talk to Sarah a bit later about how maybe that can be a bit of a double-edged sword, and sort of how to manage that enthusiasm and willingness to do things, and yeah, how to make it work well for you. Thank you, Brian. Let's turn to Maria. Maria, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your social investment that you've had recently, and yeah, what have you learned as a leader over the past year or so?
Thanks, Julie. So my name is Maria Mills. I'm the CEO of Active Prospects, and we're a health and social care charity, sort of working in the southeast of England. And we work together with around 300 people with learning disabilities and autism, and also people with mental health needs, to live aspiring lives in our community. And we have about 350 staff. And so obviously, as a direct care provider, you know, we've been massively impacted by COVID. So So obviously similar to other people, not wanting to repeat too much, and obviously everyone else here today has been on that journey as well around, you know, all those kind of early phases where, you know, we were struggling to get information and guidance and PPE and all these kind of new ways of working, to looking at how it fundamentally affected our service model delivery, and then just really kind of making sure, you know, still our strategic objectives and the things that we wanted to do, particularly because a lot of our growth focus is supporting people leave hospital. So these are people who've been in hospital for 2, 5, 10 years, that, you know, leading really restrictive lives, and particularly around COVID. There isn't probably a worse place to be than in a hospital environment, funnily enough, because, you know, you're sharing a lot of those facilities, and just the uncertainty kind of around that. So it felt very important to us to hold on to our ambition to develop new homes for people, even during COVID, because we knew, you know, the circumstances that people were found, and you know, very much looking forward to moving into their new homes. So in terms of social investment, we've been working with SASC, and we got a fund of 3.4 million to develop 22 new homes for people. So those are mostly 1-bedroom flats in a cluster with shared facilities, so that people have that sense of a community, but also, you know, got their own front door and can kind of get on with their own things, absolutely, as well. And we also got a mortgage from SASC as well, for another opportunity that we had. So that's enabled us, yes, to support another 28 people altogether. So obviously that's been really important to progress with those developments. And, you know, it was hard. Builders went off site. You know, you kind of thought, oh my God, is this going to happen ever? And, you know, exactly what that meant. But, you know, obviously we kept SASC up to date on what were happening on those developments, and our commissioners and our partners and our people, and we were able to, you know, persuade builders to come back on site and carry on developing those, but working obviously in COVID safe ways. Obviously at the moment it's terrible. It's absolutely worse than it ever has been in terms of a COVID experience. I can't, you know, we got through 2020 of having none of the people we support get COVID, which was a mixture of obviously, you know, great skill from our staff teams, but luck, you know, very much. But, you know, this wave now is terrifying, and we've had significantly higher numbers of staff catching COVID. You know, it's another level of issue. So I think what I've learned in terms of leadership is, I mean, COVID has brought us closer together, both within the organisation. I don't think I've kind of spoken or communicated, or, you know, just all of those connections everywhere. It's just been so important to make sure, you know, all of the parts of the organisation are contributing to those conversations about how we focus and what we do as an organisation, and the things that people need to do, and the masses of new ways of working we've all had to adapt to. But also kind of externally, I don't know, the levels of kind of collaboration with other organisations, both within, you know, the health and social care field, within the charitable field, you know, within our statutory partners. I just think, you know, the level of kind of, you know, kind of meet strategic working to kind of really make the most of keeping people safe, and, you know, adapting and making sure our offer is right. You know, and I think, you know, that level of collaboration is, you know, something that, you know, is to be really celebrated. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. There's some really interesting points there, which hopefully we can unpick a little bit more as we go through the discussion. Important Some points about communication, and I see on the chat there are other people here from the hospice sector, from social care, who will also have experience of those communication challenges or communication opportunities with local authorities, with the NHS, that sort of thing. So perhaps there's something to discuss more there as we go on. And yeah, you saying that it's a scary time right now, and maybe we need to talk a little bit more about the mental health needs of leaders and your staff and your volunteers, and of course perhaps your clients too. Let's turn, thank you Maria, let's turn to our social investors, starting with Mark. Would you like to reflect a little bit on the past few months in terms of what you've learned as an investor? Tell us a little bit about what you do at SASC too, and yeah, take it away. Over to you, Mark.
Thanks, Julie. Hi, everyone. Mark Bickford from Social and Sustainable Capital, SASC for short. So we provide funding to charities and other social enterprises to help them expand their work. We've been doing a lot in the last couple of years around supported housing. So working with organisations like Maria's that look after people, look after vulnerable people and need housing as part of their solution. So I think reflections from us, I mean, I think the first one is the point that Brian touched on about the resourcefulness and resilience of our borrowers. I mean, it has been amazing actually to watch that from one step removed. And you know, we've been very clear about being there to support borrowers and talk about their financing if they've got worries about it, but actually people have just really got stuck in and got on with it, and you know, staff putting themselves at personal risk to carry on looking after their beneficiaries. And you know, it's a genuine privilege to work with organisations doing that. So that would be the most important thing. I think the power of relationships has been really important. So our borrowers have been have actually asked us for very little help. They have been really resilient, and I think that's partly because some of them who, for instance, community nurseries or people that provide recycled furniture for low-income households, you know, they've had to close and they've lost income, but because they've built really good relationships across all their different funders, you know, they've been able to pull in additional grant funding to keep things going. And there's been a lot of great examples of really good collaboration with commissioners and local authorities, you know, and flexibility on both sides, where services either being provided differently, or if services just can't be provided, you know, commissioners have been continuing to pay some of our borrowers for doing different things, you know, emergency food drops, etc. So it is that point about everybody pulling together has been, you know, I guess has been one silver lining from this. So yeah, the collaboration and the importance of having strong relationships, I think has really stood out for us.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Jonny, over to you. Tell us, introduce Big Issue Invest to anyone who doesn't know it already. Tell us a little bit about what you do and what reflection you have as maybe one thing you've learned during the past few months.
Of course, thanks, Julie. First job done. I'm successfully remembered to come off mute. Yeah, so I'm Jonny Page from Big Issue Invest. Without covering too much similar grounds to Mark and the others, actually, which has been kind of quite reflective of the comments that I jotted down for this kind of an intro. Big Issue Invest, if you've not come across us, we're a social investor, we're an impact first investor. We're born out of the Big Issue magazine, and my chief exec would not be happy with me if I did not wave one at you. So consider yourself waved. And that's actually the magazine which we announced the St Helena Hospice investment in as well, so one that I've kept. We are, I think, I say that quite flippantly, but we're born out of the Big Issue magazine, and that's really important as part of our identity, because we are attached, we are completely infused with another social enterprise, and that's our model, is understanding social enterprise, being there for social enterprise, and providing finance for social enterprise. As you can imagine, it's been a pretty tumultuous year for the magazine as well. So there's been kind of on all sides, on the borrower side, on the investee side, and on the magazine side, it's been a period of grappling with a changing landscape and grappling with it fast. And to echo Mark's comments, I'm also in awe of the social enterprise resilience and the speed of reaction. One of the most kind of areas that hit home for me over the last 12 months of that was when lockdown 1 was first announced, which feels like a lifetime ago, back in March. Everyone was kind of all hands on deck. The phone was ringing every hour, seemingly, from different investees going, this is happening, how would you advise we approach this? What does this look like? What could this do for debt repayments, etc., etc. Lockdown 2 was eerily quiet, and it was almost muscle memory, and that kind of, we've done this once before, we know what we're doing, that kind of resilience baked in, and the pivot of the business model was, yeah, it was quite astounding. So just a kind of small anecdote there of something you experienced. But aside from that, I think it's been a busy year for all social investors, particularly the social investors related to some of this COVID money as well, getting grants out through the Social Enterprise Support Fund, making loans out of the Resilience Recovery Loan Fund, which has the worst acronym known to man, which is RRLF. Try and say that fast. And so it's been a busy year, not just kind of the usual funds for us, but supporting the portfolio organisations, particularly on those funds. And to Mark's point, that relationship piece being absolutely vital. And the difficult times really show you when that relationship matters the most. Are you the second, third person they're going to pick up the phone for? Or are you that investor they're really worried about calling and will put it off, and you find yourselves with a nasty surprise 4 months down the line, you've not been able to help them. And so absolutely that kind of power of relationship and being that former investor is incredibly important for us. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Jonny. Really interesting insights from you. And yeah, these relationships, this communication is so important in all that all of us are doing. I think especially during these times where we're physically isolated from each other as well. Okay, let's move into some more, put some meat on the bones of what we've just been talking about. I'm gonna run back through our panelists all again and get a bit more depth from them all, and find out a bit more about their experiences. So let's explore some of the key things that happened during the past year that will influence how you go forward into 2021. And what do we think that other social entrepreneurs and social investors can learn from your experiences here on the panel? So this time, let's start with Maria at Active Prospects. I know there's some really interesting things that you've been doing over the past few months. When we spoke the other day, you were talking about the need to move quickly, and I'd also like you to tell us about that event that you held in November for reflection. And yeah, the sort of agility that you've demonstrated as a leader and as an organisation over the past few months would be great to know about. So yeah, would you tell us a little bit about that, please, Maria? We need you off mute.
Will we ever learn? There we are, something that I haven't learnt during 2020, to come off mute. Maybe this is my year. So yes, I think absolutely kind of that agility, I think kind of throughout COVID, the ability to, to take swift actions, keep people, to lock down our services on the first wave, to find out the things that we needed to do that were very different, to bringing together the kind of structures that were going to enable that swift decision making that was, very much involving kind of stakeholders throughout the organisation to make sure those decisions were realistic and deliverable and the right ones, and listening to other things that we should be doing that we needed to incorporate kind of into that. So I think we were, able to, kind of get all that kind of policy, new policies and risk assessments and PPE and all those foundations of kind of ways of working that were going to keep people as safe as possible. That certainly happened kind of very quickly. And I think it was, kind of looking at those channels of communication and, just having a whole kind of spread around that and thinking of the things that would make difference. So we did actually furlough some staff pretty early on because it made sense to save a bit of money there. In terms of we ran cafes and shops that were around employment enabling. So some of those areas of the business weren't able to continue in the first wave. So we made sure that we could look at doing that, which meant we could look at some of that funding being utilised for other social purpose and impact, but obviously kind of keeping those staff alongside with us, working with the people we support. I did, while we were very much kind of looking at kind of local communication, one of our learning was we have a very strong co-production heart of what we do. We've got an organisation that the people we support have now, we have worked with them to set up their own organisation. And I think kind of all that kind of digital transformation that we've all embraced. I think we were slightly slow about thinking about how they could have their co-production meetings at an organisation and a local area. We kind of started doing that kind of around June, but I think we kind of missed maybe some of the, why didn't we do that in March when we were doing that for our staff communications? It was all done in a bit more of a fragmented way, but actually, the voice and learning and journeys of the people we support in terms of understanding what COVID has meant for their lives and what's important to them and how they support each other and, their well-being, all of that has kind of made it a lot more kind of doing it together has meant, I think, some of our organisational transformation has been quite embedded. We've ensured that there's been some quite structural learning through the process. So we had some surveys pretty early on about kind of what we were doing well and what we weren't doing so well at, and what things, things people wanted differently, and had lots of ways people could engage in that. And then a kind of more fundamental piece of work, it's just part of our normal strategic plan updating, is that we have a kind of annual conference that's our board members, the people we support, representatives in their organisation and our staff coming together. This is about 200 people that we obviously did by Zoom this year, but we had a number of workshops that really kind of looked at all of the things from COVID that we wanted to explore and kind of think about, how did that work for us this year? What did we want to embed? What were the kind of things that actually worked really well? And then what were the things we needed to do more of or change? Or so we looked at, from well-being to co-production to staff recruitment, training and development, communication, influencing, all of these kind of elements. We had a number of kind of, everyone could kind of contribute to those discussions, so that, we've got a really great plan that, we've all kind of come together on, in terms of, there has been masses of change over this year, and we want to make sure that those become embedded and better, and that creativity can continue. So I think that was a really useful exercise to do.
Thank you for talking about that. I wanted to highlight that because so often social entrepreneurs are running to stand still and don't take the time to reflect on what they're doing, and especially over the past few months. We're hearing from the best of you here, the best ones at communication, but I'd really love to inspire people just to take that little step back and give some time to reflect on what they're doing and what's worked well in the midst of all this, and yeah, how they can go forward with that. There was another point, Maria, that I know I'd really like you to raise, and that we were talking the other day and you mentioned the recognition of social care compared with other key services. Would you like to quickly talk about that? Because I think that will resonate with a lot of people here.
Yes, I mean, you know, absolutely. You know, our staff are just being beyond amazing, you know, just, you know, hats off to just everyone and, you know, everything, you know, that people do, and obviously, you know, across everyone's organisations. And I think following the first wave, I think, I don't know, I was quite positive around what I thought would be this fundamental change about how the role of social care staff was viewed. And I can remember going to one of the local authority strategic meetings. I'm on the integrated kind of care system board for learning disabilities. So anyway, it was the first meeting that they held, I think it was about June or something, that was kind of non-COVID, it was more around the strategy. And there was just it was almost like business as usual. And I'm like thinking, you know, there were like tenders that they still wanted to do and this, that and the other. And it's the same approach to commissioning and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just thinking, oh my God, we've gone through this massive experience. And I want to spend time talking about, you know, we've got social care staff that, we pay above, you know, we pay real living wage, we pay, you know, staff sickness and above maternity leave and things. But, you know, that's really hard for us to do as an organisation. You know, we work really hard to ensure that we can pay our staff the most that they can. But, you know, when you go to, you know, sitting in rooms full of NHS staff and, you know, all of their staff, you know, we had some staff off sick from COVID at that point that, you know, were really long-term sick, chronic sick from COVID. And you just think of the difference in terms of what that means for those staff, in terms of their income, their lives, you know. And I think I got quite upset actually by, you know, there's still that kind of disparity in terms of the protection that we offer, you know, our public servants. And, you know, and I just think, you know, we just have to keep fighting for that. And we have done some work. I'm the vice chair of Surrey Care Associations. We've done a reinventing social care type paper that's kind of got, you know, all these kind of recommendations and involved MPs and things. But, you know, I'm kind of always very hopeful, obviously, and always want to kind of push for that change and recognition of the importance of social care and the brilliance of social care staff in terms of the really skilled work that they do. But I think we just have to keep fighting for it, because I think quite often it's just not in some of the statutory services or government's interest to see a fundamental change there. So I think we're going to have to fight for it. And, you know, I think the more that we can do again in collaboration to recognise those amazing staff, the better.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Maria. That's a really important point. Sarah, let's turn to you. Oh, before we do so, I'm going to remind our audience, do put questions in the Q&A as they occur to you as we're going through, and we'll pick them up at the end. So there's a couple of questions coming already, so keep putting questions in there and I can see them coming in, and we'll pick them up afterwards. Sarah, you've got some interesting reflections I know that we could all learn from. When we were talking the other day, you were talking about the massive change that you've been through in terms of preparing your gym and then moving on from that to do something entirely different. And also we were talking earlier about the enthusiasm of staff. Brian mentioned that, the enthusiasm of staff, of board members to get on and do things. And I know, Sarah, you kind of got a different perspective on that as well. So would you like to offer us some reflections on some of those things?
Yeah, I think at the start of COVID, everyone had this sense of urgency to do something and to change and to miraculously change their entire business model overnight. And I think for me in Projekt42, we were probably only the one organisation in the community that just took a breath. Everyone was running to go online. We had like this third sector social lab in Scotland putting out, you know, let's convert everyone's business from face-to-face to online in 24 hours and let's just go. And it was really difficult as a leader to tell my team to take a breath, pause. We're not going online straight away. We're going to think about this. We're going to really think about the sustainability of our service if we transition online. We're going to think about how we can manage this effectively, the governance, the structure, the training requirements of our team, what it means to work online. And so when everyone had this sense of urgency to quickly rush out and change their services and support their service users, we put out a message that the best thing we can do to support our services is to learn how to do that properly and not just take quick fixes to patch up gaps in services. So we took a pause, and that as a leader was really difficult to tell an entire staff force that was, you know, ready to go. It was hard to get them out of the facility. We had a national pandemic, the government's telling everyone to go home, and I'm having to physically force them out to go home because they were so committed to wanting to stay on and to support the service users and just continue doing what they'd got so used to doing. So for a leader to tell everyone to go home and stay home and do nothing work-wise until I fought this through, until I'm okay knowing everyone's training needs, that was quite a challenge. But what I've learned is actually taking that pause is something that social entrepreneurs don't often get an opportunity to do. It's like we're in a rat race, and you know, you go from one day to the next, you're either chasing a product, a service, funding, like revenue, finance and investment opportunities, and rarely as social entrepreneurs do you step back and really consider, is this the best thing for you? Is this the best thing for your service, your product? And is it sustainable? Or am I merely just jumping on the bandwagon of what is popular, what is in trend right now for a social entrepreneur to be saying and doing? And I think as an organization, it was the first time we just said, we're doing nothing right now. And that time enabled us to really equip especially our mental health team with the training, the support that they needed to transition from a face-to-face delivery model to 100% online. So I think that was the big lesson we learned, is sometimes being effective is actually learning to just pause.
And tell us a bit about, I love the story of how you were at this super equipped gym with bubbles and sprays and all that sort of thing, and then you decided completely to move away from that.
Yeah, so we went through all the pains of any organisation that's working with people in the public, of teaching everyone to be COVID aware, to do online training, in-house training, to understand how to disinfect equipment, we bought handheld disinfectant guns, to big fogging machines. So every hour, the entire gym was disinfected. But at the same time, I'm consciously aware of every time we disinfect and use a fogging machine, the depreciation on the equipment is increased because the chemicals are destroying my £15,000 treadmill. And I just, before the government announced the gyms were closing, I thought the depreciation versus the revenue in of the amount of chemicals we're using, it just wasn't worth staying open for, to put the quality of the equipment, to put the staff at risk. And again, I had to make a decision which the team 100% disagreed with. Every single member of staff I had working at the time disagreed with me quite openly that we should not have closed and we should have maintained our service and kept going. But as a leader, I had to go against popular opinion and say we're closing, and we're not closing temporarily. We're closing until it's 100% safe to open and when conditions are better, because I felt an organisation that is so community-led had to send a really strong message that we are taking care of our community by choosing to stay closed.
Yeah, I think there's some really interesting lessons about interesting leadership lessons there in what you're saying, Sarah. So thank you so much for sharing those insights with us. Brian, let's turn to you at St Helena Hospice. We'd really love to hear more about this lottery and about the importance of having diverse income streams. And you're a charity sort of exploring those different types of income streams and yeah, helping you be resilient through all of this. Would you like to tell us something about that?
Yes. As an organisation, we need to raise nearly £10 million a year to fund the cost of our services. We get about 30% of that from the NHS funding, but that still leaves a gap of about 7 million that we have to raise through our own resources and efforts. We do that through a number of different streams. So we have a number of shops that raise funds for us. We have the lottery, we obviously get legacies from people, and we have a fundraising operation. It's been part of our strategy for a few years now. We recognise that much as we'd love to get more money from the NHS, the reality is they're financially constrained, and it's unlikely that we're going to see much more flowing to us from them. So we put in place a strategy where we actively are seeking to grow and diversify our own revenue streams. So we have, over the last few years, been expanding our shops portfolio. So that now our shops now turn over about £3.5–4 million a year, contributing between £1 and £1.5 million in profit to the running of the services that we provide. We've also been expanding our lottery, which, with the help of Big Issue support, we were aiming to almost triple the size of our lottery. Most organisations will run their own lottery for themselves, but we have a model where having all that expertise in-house to run a lottery means that you can run a lottery for anyone. So we now have 14 hospices that we run a lottery for, and 13 other charities. Interestingly, during the last 12 months, we have had a lot more charities coming and knocking at our door and asking, can we run a lottery for them, please? So while we haven't been able to actually do much, we have signed up over the last few months 6 new charities, and we're talking with a good number of other ones about putting in place a lottery to support their activities. So one of the things I think that's allowed us some resilience in the last 12 months is because we have a diverse range of income. Any charity who runs events, and we run events of various sorts, so we have various walks, we do marathons, we do all the sorts of things many charities do, but of course all those came to a grinding halt during last year, and while we dipped our toe in the water of doing some virtual events, they never quite took off in the way that for example, the London Marathon, there was a virtual one, but it didn't generate anything like the interest or income that the genuine event did. So we've been actively diversifying our income streams, and the lottery has that almost unique thing that it not only helps us, so it not only raises about £1.5 million for us, it raises similar amounts for a whole host of other charities, from some quite small ones to some national charities. So it's a great opportunity for both us and for others to benefit from doing that. I think also part of the lesson that we've learned, as I mentioned, I think in my introduction, we were in this place where our income was being pushed down, but our services were being called on even more. Because of what we do, it was almost inevitable that was the case, because more people are ill and dying. Inevitably, that's going to put greater demand on our services. So we had to restructure our services. So all the day services that we ran as an organisation, we effectively had to close. But what we did was we redistributed all that resource into providing other services, either in our inpatient unit or more into our community services, so looking after people in their home, and that includes if they were in a care home or in their own homes. And when I mentioned earlier about our staff, one of the interesting things was how many of our retail staff, whom we employ about 60, who we put on furlough or would have put on furlough, volunteered to work in the charitable parts of the organisation, so supporting our inpatient unit, or working with our community nursing team and so on. That how keen they are to support the organisation, even though that they were being stood down from their own roles. So very, very challenging time. But I think the message and it's sort of I think even made that more important from our point of view. Part of your resilience as an organisation is obviously the people you have, but also the resources you draw on. Make sure you spread your risk well. Someone had asked me 12 months ago, you're going to close all your shops with very little notice. I just said, well, actually, our shops are probably our most resilient form of income. And here we are now getting zero pretty much. Some online trading we continue, but all the traditional charity shop side is closed. So keep in mind resilience. It spreads your risks. It means that if something happens, as has in this case, at least you've got a number of different sources. So we have an active policy now that we've been pursuing for about 18 months of increasing our different revenue streams. And that's where being able to talk to social investors such as Big Issue, who I think are very supportive of that approach, or certainly Big Issue has been very, very useful and allowed us to start doing that.
I think that's some really interesting points for those people who think of themselves as pure social entrepreneurs to think about. And we've, over the past few months, some of the social entrepreneurs have been complaining that they did move very, maybe if they've been charities before, they'd moved to a enterprising way of making their income, and suddenly, like you're saying, with the charity shops, that's been hit overnight, and they're like, well, we've moved on from grants and that sort of thing now, but now perhaps we're going to have to go back to that. So that diversity of income streams is a really interesting and important point, I think, for all of us in this arena to consider. Let's turn to our social investors. Jonny, let's start with you this time. Maybe give us a couple of minutes reflecting on how you've supported your investees during this time, maybe the specific investees we've got here, and also, like you were saying earlier, Jonny, how can you be the sort of social investor that people do pick up the phone to if they need a bit of support rather than waiting for that quarterly review?
Good question. And actually, if I work backwards, the how do we be the social investor that people pick up the phone to, I think it underpins the relationship that you set the tone with from the start. It's about being a relational investor in that first conversation, not that investor where you get one chance, and if the pitch isn't quite right or you say the wrong word at the wrong time, then you're out. It's about working together on an investment proposal, kind of collaborating on what would work for the cash flows of the organisation, what would work for the risk position of the investor. St Helena is a perfect example of that. Brian and I have had many conversations in the build up to investment about what exactly was right. We weren't even talking about the lottery business in the first instance either. It was an iteration of what's best for the hospice, how can we use our expertise to help you as well. And ultimately the coming together of management team, trustee group and investor group, and that's kind of that important relationship then progresses, and you find out pretty quickly when the tough times hit if that relationship's in place or not in the right way. And yeah, so 2020 for us was a year of fortunately fairly affirming conversations, but equally some very tough conversations around very practically organisations that are seeing a significant decline in their income. and therefore needing support on the other side, the cost side, which inevitably is the investor. Offering repayment holidays, working through kind of different cash profiling for repayment, working through different terms of loans, what's the best for them. The landscape changes, and it changed last year, and so the product that you initially invested in on pre-2020 might not be the best way of, and best design for the product now going forwards. And so it just took that kind of open mind, that the openness and communication of ourselves with our own investment committee as well, to make sure there are no surprises, and just working through as a group. So I think that's probably kind of the key process that we saw going through 2020 and what's going to lead into 2021. I'd also say as well that one of the things that I've experienced quite a lot working with management and boards over the last year is the supportive nature required. I mean, the leaders will, I say this as a kind of broad generalization, will not have been as much under as much pressure and stress as last year, and avoiding burnout, making sure that the leaders are well equipped and well supported in their roles has been a really important kind of aspect of, in some ways, not the investor's responsibility, but certainly an investor's kind of position is one to highlight and understand and support where we can the kind of that relationship they're having at a top level. And the organisations that have done best and that have either made the hard decisions like Sarah's talked about around actually pausing, which is totally countercultural and was a hugely important decision for them, all the way to St Helena Hospice, which is pivoting and getting income streams from elsewhere. Those conversations are predicated often on a very supportive board kind of social enterprise leader relationship, and that's really important. A proactive chair, the right skill set on the board to support the social enterprise at the right time. And so we've kind of seen those organisations prosper more than others, I'd say, and that's been quite stark. And then finally, yeah, I'll stop there. All yours, Julie.
Sorry, I'm speeding up a little because I want to leave time for some of those good questions we've got coming in after we finish speaking. So Mark, same questions to you, please. How do you become the sort of investor that people pick up the phone to, and how do you support your investees well, constructively? Turn off your mute.
Maria, you're not alone. So I don't know if he's listening in today, but there's a wonderful guy called Martin Hogg that runs a community interest company in Birmingham called Citizen Coaching. And Martin said a few years ago that some social investors are just bankers in sandals. And I think I think probably 5 or 6 years ago, I think we'd say SASC was guilty of that sometimes. I think now, I think we see our job increasingly as trying to understand what kind of risks stop social enterprises expanding and doing more of what they do, and working out which of those we can actually pass on to investors, to come up with funding solutions that are genuinely different. So we're more than just, perhaps a concessionary interest rate and a vague promise of will be nice if things go wrong. So that's very much what's underpinned our housing fund and the other things that we're working on going forward. So that's a kind of longer term, more philosophical thing. In terms of short term practical stuff, it's really hard to stay close to your borrowers and be available if your team's running around trying to fund new projects as well as look after borrowers once you've funded the project. So we're actually investing, or we have invested in and are expanding it in a separate team whose sole focus is just to look after borrowers once we've done the initial project. So they're in regular touch and they're really up to speed with what's going on, so we can hopefully react quickly when we're needed. And I think it's hard to do that if you haven't got that dedicated focus.
Yeah, good points. Thanks, Mark. Let's turn to some questions. So let's start with Matteo. Sorry if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly. I think I've got a button if I click answer live for you, Matteo, you can ask your question to us, and you're unmuted live. Are you there? Can you speak? We will see. Talking to permitted.
Hi, hello, everyone.
There he is. Matteo, go ahead and introduce yourself quickly and ask your question.
Hi, my name's Matteo Yoon. I'm an associate in the impact investment practice at a law firm called Herbert Smith. My question was for the impact investors on the panel, and it was and the social enterprises about whether COVID has driven you to consider different types of investment structures that you may not have previously used before, like convertible loans or revenue-linked loans. I guess that's both from the investor side, but I guess for the social enterprises as well, whether they're seeing those coming to them as well.
Thank you, Matteo. Who would like to answer that? Jonny?
I'll go first. Hi, Matteo. Good to see you again. Yeah, really good question. And the short answer is yes, although I'd say it's accelerated those thoughts as opposed to kind of surfacing them from a fresh start. We're very aware at Big Issue Invest that we need to take a patient approach to the way that we invest. We're also very aware that we need to, as much as we can, correlate the liquidity profile of the investee, i.e. the kind of the cash flows the investee is having versus the product that they're trying to get to. We could go down the dangerous rabbit warren of conversation around legal structures and what's the best type of, can a non-CLS organization take an equity type product, and therefore is the revenue participation loan one of the best kind of things to target? Should we look at slightly further down P&L, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the things at the moment that we're progressing with Big Issue Invest is a fund that's focused on the diverse-led organisations, and a fund that's focused on investing into these diverse-led organisations with a product that is risk-bearing and patient. And to try and get through some of that jargon, it essentially means even if the organisation is not a company limited by shares, can we imitate equity in some way with a product? But can we also imitate equity in some way with a product that doesn't require an exit within, say, 3 to 5 years that venture capitalists are very, very good at? And taking, therefore, that more patient approach, which changes the whole emphasis on the relationship with trying to accelerate growth plans beyond what the social enterprise is trying to achieve, trying to build to sustainability rather than market share, and all those really important things that I think are a really important plug that social investors can fill. So the short answer is yes, we're thinking about that, and yes, we're actually developing a fund that is doing exactly that at the moment.
Thanks, Jonny. Would anyone else like to add to that from the panel?
Hello.
Brian.
We've, as Jonny knows, been looking at some alternative ways of funding services. One of the things that the pandemic forced us to do was considerably reshape our services. And it also meant that we, some of the good things that came out of it was that partnership working between various organisations stepped up a level. So while we always work quite closely with the NHS and various other partners, it has moved to a new level because we had to be effective in this new environment. So we then started taking on some different roles around how to coordinate end-of-life care in our area. And as part of that, the new care model that we, excuse my dog whining. It's not me, I promise.
My dog's being quiet in the background, so I'm doing better.
We've been looking at new models of care, but of course to introduce new models it causes an outlay at the start before you can then start seeing the benefit. And we've been exploring new ways of funding that. So funding the repayment of loans out of cost savings further down the line is something we've been looking at.
Thank you, Brian and Brian's dog. Let's move on. We've got a question from Delanthe. Delanthe, would you like to ask the panel directly? Can we hear from you? Ask the panel directly your question. I'm not sure what button I need to press to make this happen. There we go. Allowed to talk. There we go. Delanthe, would you like to ask your question?
Oh, okay. I wasn't expecting that, but sure.
I'm sure you can phrase it much better than I can paraphrase it.
It's just that we're very small. So I used to work in the local authority, and we provide psychological services to children with learning disabilities and special needs. And our funding has always come from local authorities or schools. But then with the closure of schools from March, and then restrictions on home visits, we literally lost all our income pretty much straight away. And we've really struggled. And when I say we, it's small. It's like me and then associates, because we've only been going for about 4 years. So by last year, we were building up our income stream, and it would have been great. And then the pandemic. But then what we struggle with is then to access grant funding, because we don't have a portfolio of grants. So we lose out on all the bids. Ironically, we literally target as well children from diverse communities, ethnic minority communities as well. But so we haven't even accessed those, and we're led by someone who's of color as well. And so I didn't know about the social investment, but the 3 examples you've given, which have been excellent, they all seem quite large. We don't have that flexibility. So I'm just wondering, where does the advice, or where can small social enterprises access this kind of funding, or do you have to be of a certain size? And not only that, but also a point one of you said, is there any advice for us, because we're past startup, we're kind of like in the middle phase, and now we feel really, really vulnerable, and it feels such a shame to fold, because at this stage, and I can go back to local authority, that's not the issue. So I'm just wondering, how do you support ones that have been going for about 4 to 5 years, and how can we keep going, really, when we haven't got the kind of workforce?
That middle stage is tricky, isn't it? Would one of the investors or Melanie from Big Society like to answer that question? And Delanthe, it sounds like you could benefit from quite a lot more detail than we can answer now. So maybe we can give you some pointers for information.
That's great. Thank you.
Who could offer to answer that one? Mark? I notice you unmuted yourself there. Oh, there's Mel.
Yeah, actually, I think probably without volunteering her, although I am, maybe Melanie's probably got a better overview than me, actually.
Over to you, Mel.
Neatly passed.
Maybe cheater.
I was trying to sit quietly just in the background, but that one, definitely looked like. So I suppose I just want to give a little bit of reassurance, Delanthe, that the average first-time requirement or lending for a social enterprise or charity is £50,000, and that's been coming down. So social investment isn't only for large organisations, even though I know we're perhaps talking about a range of organisations that maybe seems very different to where you are. However, that has to come with some caveats that, if you are talking about grant funding and you need grant because either you haven't yet developed your revenue streams, or simply the revenue streams that you would usually rely on have dried up, then no social investment is probably going to work for you. So it would be wrong to tell you that that's the case. And you aren't unique, I suppose, unfortunately, that for many organisations that haven't relied on grants and have relied on trading, that the pandemic has made that even more difficult, particularly if you don't have grant relationships. But there are a whole range of support programs, so they've been flagged there for COVID. I know Ishita will drop you a direct message as well, because there are some specific resources through an organisation called Spark & Co. But it is a real challenge. I think probably the best advice that I would give you, other than looking at the investor directory, if you think that repayable finance could work for you, is also have a look at another organisation like yours, because there are lots of organisations that have found themselves in this very difficult position. But I'm going to round up by saying social investment isn't only for big organisations.
All right, thanks very much. I'll look at the slides. Thank you.
Thank you, Delanthe, and hopefully Ishita can give you some further pointers there. Thank you for that question. I want to finish on time, so I'm aware that I haven't done one important thing, which is to invite our 2 social investors, just to quickly give us 30 seconds each from them on where they're going in 2021, because I want to sort of point our audience towards what to look out for over the next year from our social investors, or from the social investors we've got here. And then we've got, I think, one great question to finish on from Rich. Rich, I'll come over to you and give you the microphone in a moment. So Mark, would you like to go ahead and just give us a quick insight into where SASC is going over the next year?
Yeah, so we'll be working hard to do as much as we can with our housing fund and get the word out there to as many charities that support vulnerable people as possible. You know, that it's out there and available, and taking the philosophy from that, which I talked about, i.e. taking risk away from social enterprises and putting it on to investors, applying that approach to different social themes. So we're looking at fostering, children leaving care, community renewable energy projects where the community benefit piece has tended to be very much bottom of the pile. So yeah, applying that philosophy over a broader range of different areas will be the main focus for us this year.
Okay, thank you. And Jonny?
I was very succinct. I'll try and do the same. We are at the moment in the midst of developing a few new funds at Big Issue Invest. Two key headline funds at the moment that we're working on. One is a secured debt fund, which we love for the sake of Helena investment, and we quite transparently, honestly, want to do more of those. That type of investment, it's something that from our existing funds we know is a strength of our investments, and we want to continue doing that. So a slightly more specialist fund than the one we've done in the past, which is a more general fund. But we're also looking at the one that I alluded to earlier, which is called at the moment the Growth Impact Fund, and I say at the moment because it's very much in development. But that's targeting earlier / growth stage, and actually might be that kind of intermediary ground that we're talking about, but not quite being at the scale that we've talked about today. Investments into predominantly diverse-led organisations and equity or equity-like type capital as well. So two funds that will look very different, but take the kind of success stories out of existing funds that we've done to date. All
right, thank you, Mark and Jonny. Let's take one final question. Rich, you've got a good question there, and if I hit answer live, I hope I've been able to give you the microphone. Rich, there you are. Would you like to ask your question to the panel?
Hi there, everyone. It's Rich here from Sortified. So for the social enterprises, what have been the one or two biggest blockers or challenges in terms of getting through the crisis? And in your answer, you can't say funding.
Okay, nice short snappy question. I like it, Rich. Thank you. Who should we turn to first? Sarah, what do you think?
I think my biggest blocker is everyone has a perception and sort of predefined expectation of what, as a social entrepreneur, you can do. And just because Projekt42 started with fitness, isn't necessarily what we'll continue with or where we'll go in the future. And I find keeping up with the expectation that what we do is what we'll always do is difficult to work against. And I found that has been a big blocker to our scalability. And as an entrepreneur in this sector, I found that quite challenging, that there's this expectation that as an entrepreneur, you will do one thing and you'll do that and that only. And we're at a stage now where, we're closing down our fitness services, and in its place, something else will launch. And it's been very challenging to present our alternative way of working on the basis that people think we should always continue with what we originally launched with, because we're an organisation that's only 2 years into being a social enterprise. We popped up 2 years ago. We have a service base of 8,000 people, so therefore we should continue doing what we've always done. That's been a big barrier, is allowing people to shake off what Projekt42 previously was, and here we are presenting a new Projekt42 that we're moving forward with. that has been a challenge.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Brian, what do you think? One or two biggest blockers and challenges for you?
Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you, Rich. I am going to mention funding. Having said that, we were fortunate in that part of our funding gap was filled by the NHS, because they wanted us to expand our services, so provided some additional support. But in many ways, the biggest thing has been our staff, in both a positive and a negative way. In a positive way, they've been really keen to do more, to do as much as they can, and so on. In a negative way, to get over to them, just doing what they did before is not what's needed. We had to do something differently. So we had to change what we did. And for some, that proved quite challenging. So it was changing our services. And I think the conclusion that we've arrived at is we knew we had to change our services. We've been doing that probably slowly over the last year or two. I think in the space of 6 months, we've done 3-4 years worth of change. And I think we will, when this comes to an end, we will come out of this stronger, in the sense that our services will be more focused on delivering and supporting people in better ways. So that's the good and the bad side of staff. Really keen, really supportive, but also really challenging in trying to get them to understand that we need to do it a bit different now. And I think that was the biggest challenge we faced.
Lovely, thank you, Brian. Maria, over to you. What do you think?
Yes, I think staffing, just capacity, because we've been growing. So, you know, all that kind of need to bring on new staff and, you know, support their induction development, whilst we have an existing staff team, you know, kind of facing, you know, huge demands being kind of made from them, and just kind of balancing to make sure that that is, you know, it's all manageable from all parties. And I just think the other one is, I just think, you know, I've been around a long time, and social care just is commissioned by the hour, you know, always the same way, forever and ever and ever. And, you know, until we really grasp about it being commissioned in a different way that supports people's aspirations and outcomes in a more creative way, I just feel, you know, we're just missing lots of tricks. And, you know, and I think it's a shame if we can't have those important conversations still, because, you know, there are those bigger pieces of structural change that we still need to push forward on.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Rich, for that thought-provoking question for us to finish on. So there we are. We've had lots of insight, lots of ideas from our panelists, and I want to thank them for generously sharing their time and their thoughts with us this afternoon. We at Pioneers Post and Good Finance really appreciate it. I'm sure our audience really appreciate it. I know there's some conversations gone on down the side in the chat, and there's a couple of questions we haven't managed to get to from people, but hopefully you can sort of connect with one another after this. We're going to put a story up on Pioneers Post if you'd like to watch the video again as well, and sort of think through some of the things that have come up. So yeah, thank you all for joining us. What we hope is that we've given you something positive, some energy, some inspiration to take forward into 2021, and hopefully this year will be a bit easier than the last one. Yeah, keep up to date with Good Finance, keep up to date with Pioneers Post. Thank you once again to the panel. Thank you to those people who've joined us, and we'll say goodbye. Panel, you can all turn your cameras off and go and have a nice cup of tea. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.